Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah amma ba'd. So I just wanted to kind of shed some light on a post that I made yesterday. I said, dear single people, and it can also apply to married people as well. Stop going into marriages with expectations of your spouse that only you can fulfill. Stop going into marriages with expectations of your spouse that only you can fulfill. Sometimes people go into marriages or go into relationships and they have the expectation that my spouse is supposed to make me happy. That's your job as my spouse, to make me happy. And when I'm not happy in my marriage, then there's something wrong with my spouse. Our marriage is not working. Something is wrong with you because I am not happy. And the second one is you are supposed to love me the way that I want to be loved. I want to be loved like this, and it's your responsibility to love me the way that I want to be loved. This is all wrong from so many different angles. And this is why many people are in their marriages right now, in their relationships right now, frustrated. They don't understand why. And they begin thinking that it's their spouse's problem or something wrong, inherently wrong with the marriage, why they are not happy. Let me tell you why you're not happy. Let me help you to process. All right? Let me help you to process. Number one, it is not your spouse's responsibility to make you happy. It is not your spouse's responsibility to make you happy. That's your job. Your job as two people sharing the same space, married, sharing the same space, is to have your life outside of your marriage and doing the things that make you happy, and then coming back to your marriage happy, sharing your happiness with your spouse. That's what being in a relationship is about. It's not sitting in one room, your spouse sitting in the other room, and you trying to figure out why you're so miserable, right? That's not what being in a relationship is about. It's about doing what you believe is going to make you happy in life, in general. Living your best life, doing what you believe is going to make you happy, whether it's your job, whether it's your entrepreneurial pursuits, whatever it is that's going to make you happy. And then once you achieve that happiness, you come back to the center. You come back to the center, to the table with your spouse, sharing your happiness with your spouse. That's what it's about. When you're sitting back waiting for your spouse to make you happy, you're going to constantly be miserable. Why? Because number one, maybe that's not what your spouse signed up for. Maybe I didn't sign up to be in a relationship with you to make you happy, to spend my entire life making you happy. Essentially pouring all of yourself into someone else, leaving very little left for you. That leaves very little left for you. That's not a relationship. That's not a relationship. This is not about me spending my entire life trying to make you happy, right? And then in the end, you're never going to be satisfied. You're a human being. Your ability to be content is, in most instances, insatiable. You understand? That's our nature as human beings. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the child of Adam, he said, if the child of Adam had two valleys filled with gold, he would desire a third. That means that our palate for happiness and contentment is in most instances is insatiable. We're constantly taking, pulling from the other person to make ourselves happy. And meanwhile, the other one is on the rabbit wheel, just constantly running, trying to make you happy. And then we finally reach a point where we realize, you know what? You're never going to be completely happy. Why? Because you are placing your happiness in a human being and outside of yourself, when happiness should be what you do to make you happy, not what I do to make you happy. You guys following me? It's not about what I do to make you happy. It's about what you do to make you happy. Don't have your spouse have you on this, this rabbit wheel. You're constantly running round the wheel over and over and over again, right? Over and over again, trying to please your spouse, which you're never going to reach that point. There is no destination, right, for this. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لو كان لابن آدم واديان من ذهب لتمنى الثالثة, that if the son of Adam had two valleys filled with gold, he would still desire a third. Never satisfied. One of the great scholars of Islam, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, رضا الناس غاية لن تدرك ورضا الله غاية تدرك. Pleasing people is a goal you can never achieve, and that includes your spouse. Some people are just never going to be completely satisfied with you. That's just the reality of it. Pleasing people is a goal that you can never achieve. لن تدرك. You will never be able to achieve pleasing everyone. He said, وَرِضَ اللَّهِ غَايَةٌ تُدْرَكْ. But pleasing God, pleasing Allah is a goal you can always achieve. One of Allah's names is Ash-Shakur. Allah is appreciative of any little good that we do. Even the thought of doing something good, even though we don't physically do it, Allah is still going to reward you for it. Allah is Ash-Shakur. Shakurun Halim. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is, appreciative and patient with his creation. Shakurun Halim. Even thinking about doing something good, Allah rewards you for it. Try that with your spouse. You say, well, I thought about you today and I was going to do X, Y, Z. And of course, for your spouse, that's not good enough. That's never going to be good enough. That's never going to be good enough. So trying to please somebody, you come to the realization that that's never going to happen. The person, no matter what I do, this person is never going to be satisfied. The Prophet ﷺ said that a man could spend his entire life doing nothing but right by his spouse, by his wife. He said, "Lo ahsanta ila ihdahunna ad-dahr." If you spent your entire life doing nothing but right by your woman, and then she was to see one thing wrong that you did, she would say, "Ma ra'aytu minka khayrun qat." I've never known any good from you. I've never known any good from you. You've never done anything good. Completely dismiss everything that you have ever done based upon one mistake that you've made. Based upon one mistake that you've made. And no, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have expectations. I'm saying our expectations of our spouse should be realistic. Unrealistic expectation is the mother of all frustration. You want to see someone frustrated? Look at them. Look at the expectations that they have of their spouse. Unrealistic. If you are expecting me to make you happy, you're going to always be frustrated and disappointed because I'm struggling trying to find my own happiness. You know what I mean? Like you're in a relationship with somebody who didn't sign up for that. I didn't sign a marriage contract and go into a marriage with you to spend the rest of my entire life trying to make you happy. That wasn't the agreement. I'm still trying to find happiness for me. I just chose to share that with you. I chose to share my life with you. And whatever happiness I find in my personal life, you are the first one I'm going to share that with. You understand? You are the first one that I'm going to share that with. But I am not looking for you to pour all of yourself into me to make me happy. That's selfish. That's selfish. You understand? And it's not fair. So if you're married to your spouse or in a relationship with someone, for those of you who are not Muslim, and you are in a relationship with someone and you are expecting that person to make you happy, and you're saying to yourself, I'm not happy. This relationship is not making me happy. I don't feel happy in this relationship. Maybe it's not the relationship. Maybe it's not your spouse. Maybe it's you. Because the only one that is responsible for your happiness is you. Give you a Quranic reference. The Prophet ﷺ, Allah says in the Quran, "Kullu insanin alzamnahu ta'irahu fi unuki." Every human being, we have fastened his fate to his neck. Meaning, you are responsible. God gave you the highest responsibility of happiness, and that is to determine where you go in the hereafter, heaven or hell. That's your choice. That's your choice, where you decide to go. And if Allah gave you the choice of eternal damnation in hell or eternal bliss in paradise, and that's in the hereafter, in the afterlife, what about in this life? You don't think that he gave you that as well? That's your responsibility as well. Don't place your happiness in the hands of somebody else. Go and check and see if it's done. Don't put your happiness in the hands of someone else. The second thing is love. And this is where we get this whole thing twisted. That you are not loving me the way I want to be loved in a relationship. That's not my responsibility. It's not your responsibility to love me. That's my job. My job is to love me. That's not your job to love me. You might be struggling to find love for yourself. How many people, man, don't even love themselves? How many people need permission from other people to love themselves? Take it a step further, right? You a passenger in your own journey to self-love. You have people out here who need validation and permission from other people to love themselves. And then we're in a relationship with this person expecting that person to love me. How can you have that type of expectation from somebody? You're expecting the person to love you, and the person hasn't even found a space where they can love themselves first. Faqidu shay la yu'ti, as the scholars of Islam may have a principle, someone who doesn't have something can't give you what they don't have. You're expecting the person to love you when they don't even understand love themselves. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yuhibbu li akhihi ma yuhibbu li nafsi." None of you truly believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. But if you don't love anything for yourself, then how could you expect that this person is going to love for you what they love for them when they don't even love themselves? This is, predominantly in the African American Muslim community, this is where we got it twisted. We keep citing this hadith as if it's some type of new revelation that, what happened to love for your brother, what you love for yourself? Well, guess what? I can't expect for you to love for me what you are supposed to love for yourself when you don't even love yourself. You understand? Here again with the expectations. The only time you can expect someone to love for you what they love for themselves is when you see that they actually love for themselves. Then the expectation is legitimate. It's a legitimate expectation. It's a reasonable expectation. But when a person doesn't love themselves, how can you expect anything from them? So we in a relationship, I don't feel loved, this person doesn't make me feel like I'm loved, or whatever the case may be. Start with loving yourself first. Because when you love yourself, you don't require that degree or that intensity of love from your spouse. We are essentially, not loving ourselves, not acquainting ourselves with ourselves. And then we're expecting our spouse to do all of the work. So I'm supposed to love me and love you, right? Come on, you got to be kidding me, man. We got this whole relationship thing, man. And the thing is that we're either going to figure this out or we're going to keep making a mess of our lives. You only got one heart. How many times can your heart be broken before, it's shattered to pieces? How many cracks in your heart are you going to be able to withstand before your heart just shatters to pieces? And we go in and out of relationships, whether you're Muslim, you're not Muslim, we do the same thing. We exploit love for our own personal agenda. And it's not fair. Love starts with you. It's not your job to love me. That's my job. Let me love me first. And then I will only require from you, just to, help build on top of the love that I already have. But if I come in empty, right? I don't even love myself. And then I'm requesting from you to love me, to a certain degree. Like I'm exhausting you as a spouse. And that within itself is not the definition of love. Love is an action, love is a verb, not a noun. That means that you already are bringing something to the table in terms of loving yourself. So that means that what you require from your spouse is not a lot, because there's already something there. There's a foundation already there of self-love. But when you don't have self-love, you don't love yourself, you're requiring your spouse to love you for them and to love you for you. And that's not fair. That's not fair to anybody, man. That's not fair to anybody. And we're either going to figure this whole relationship thing out, or we're going to leave behind a trail of tears and broken hearts. And many of us have already done this. We're going to keep putting ourselves into situations where our heart is broken, our feelings are hurt, our spirit is shattered. And then we got barely enough energy to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and then go back into another relationship all over again. And eventually we just give up. Eventually we get tired of relationships altogether, and we say, you know what? I'm done with this whole relationship thing. And it's not relationships that's the problem. It's you that's the problem. It's you. Not done. It's you that's the problem. It's not relationships that's the problem. It's you. You're ill-equipped. You're unprepared, right? And you go right back into another relationship all over again. You don't even take the time out to learn yourself. When you get out of a relationship, that's the space that you need to reflect and ponder on all of the things that you did wrong, so that the very next time you go into that situation, you don't make the same mistake over again. And the lesson will continue to repeat itself until you get it. You go prematurely into another relationship all over again, you're going to get the same headache all over again, because you did not give yourself enough time to heal. You did not heal properly, right? That's like you get a scar, you get a wound on your body, and then you don't let it heal, and then you go back out, you're a football player, whatever the case may be, and you get a bone broken, you get something, and it doesn't heal properly. You go back out, it's going to break all over again, because you didn't give it time to heal. You didn't heal. This incessant need to be in a relationship, constantly being engaged emotionally. This need to constantly be emotionally engaged, even if it's unhealthy. It's sad, man. It really is, man. We are really a desperate nation of people, desperate for attention, validation, right? We are a desperate nation of people, which is why we're constantly being taken advantage of, always. Whether it's through religion, whether it's through consumerism, capitalism, you name it. Entertainment, we're constantly victims. Constant victims. Because we haven't taken the time out to heal properly. When you heal properly, as my post today, that marital problems are not coincidental. Problems in your relationship are not coincidental. It's not your job to fix your spouse. That's not your job. It's your job to arrange the meeting between your spouse and him or herself. That's your job, by just being who you are. We are a challenge for one another. Your spouse will challenge you. Allah says in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ. We have made some of you a test for others. You a test for your spouse, and your spouse is a test for you. Your job is not to fix your spouse. Sometimes we think my relationship with my spouse would just be perfect if they would just be exactly the way I want them to be. Well, guess what, genius? It wasn't meant to be that way. Your spouse is not going to be the way that you want them to be, so that you can fix the things about yourself that need to be fixed. Your job is not to fix your spouse. Your job is to arrange the meeting between your spouse and him or herself by being exactly who you are. By being who you are going to force your spouse to now begin to challenge themselves. What doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. So if your spouse right now is challenging you, then it's changing you. And hopefully for the best. Hopefully for the best. If your spouse is challenging you right now, it's challenging you to change you. Change your outlook, change your perspective, change your approach. That's what it's intended to do. Allah didn't put us two in the same space, coming from two different walks of life at the same time for reasons of just procreation, sex, some temporary enjoyment. It's deeper than that. Allah wants us to be the best that we can be, the best human being that you can possibly be. And the only way that that's going to happen is that you got to go through, a cleansing process. And that's what your spouse represents. Your spouse is your cleansing process. They're cleansing you of your arrogance, of your pride, of your ego, cleansing you of your impatience, right? Cleansing you. And there's no one that can say that they were in, a legitimate relationship, except that when they came out, they were far more prepared for the next relationship than they were for the one that they just recently got out of. It's preparing you. We used to have a saying in Jahiliyyah, steel sharpens steel, right? Steel sharpens steel. So as you two are in a relationship with one another, you're constantly challenging one another, you're sharpening one another. And then when you go into your next relationship, you're far more wise, right? You're more prepared, you're more understanding about, the nuances that make you who you are. You understand? This is not coincidental. Allah, God knows what he's doing. When he paired you up with the person he paired you up with, he knew exactly what he was doing. However, we don't understand human relationships. We don't understand the divine that is behind the connection between us. It's deeper than just the physical connection, the attraction, or you're cute, I'm cute, we need to get together, and then, we have all these things in common. What we have to start doing is looking at the deeper implications of human relationships. The deeper implications of human relationships. Sometimes two people get together not for themselves, but for other people. How many times two people got together and she introduced, your friend to her friend, and you introduced her friend to your friend, and you two got together, but your friends also got together. You end up separating and your friends end up staying together. You two were not together for yourselves. You two were together so that your friends could make that connection and stay together. Sometimes you get into a relationship with someone and it's not about you. It's about the children that come out as a result of that. You get together, you marry this person, and then you separate. You got 3-4 children that came out of that situation. It wasn't meant for you and that person to be together, right? Because the person that you start off with is usually not the person that you end up with. You understand? It's real facts, man. Real jewels that I'm giving you guys right here. But we got to stop making a mess of our lives, man. Using marriage and love as the, as the cushion, for our mistakes. And we have to stop doing that, man. So, does it mean that you shouldn't have expectations of your spouse? Absolutely. You should have expectations. Your standards dictate your expectations. When you have standards, then you automatically have expectations. Because your standards and your expectations are intimately connected. If you have standards, then you automatically have expectations. Because you expect that those standards are going to be met. Go check again. So I just wanted to, I posted the comment, some people didn't understand, where I was coming from. So, I'm sitting out here waiting for some pizza for my kids. So I figured I would take the time out, just to kind of, verbally express what I meant. How do we then move on after old mistakes and stop regret? You got to live with the regret. You've made the mistakes. You got to live with that. You have to live with that. Those were the choices and decisions that you made. And you have to live with that. That's part of being an adult. Part of being an adult is that we make decisions that sometimes we regret, and then we have to live with that. Children, you don't necessarily have to live with that regret. Because you're children and you'll outgrow that. But once you hit adulthood, mistakes are more costly, and you got to live with the, the ramifications of, the decisions that you make. That's part of being an adult. How you move on, you have to begin to unpack your bag, man. Stop carrying your luggage from relationship to relationship. Live in your discomfort. Absolutely. I got to live with it. I had a child with I'm just saying in hypothetically, you had a child with someone that, thinking back now, if you could do it all over again, you wouldn't have children with that person. You got to live with that. Those children ain't going nowhere. And you sitting there stewing over the fact that happened is not going to change anything. You got to begin to unpack your bags and stop traveling from one relationship to another with all of your baggage. And how do you unpack? You begin to sort through and separate the mistakes that you made from the mistakes that you made in the relationship that contributed to the breakdown of the relationship, and how you can grow from that, and the mistakes that the other person made that was as a result of some of the things that you've done. You got to stop victimizing. You got to stop making yourself look like the victim. Because when you victimize, you never have to look at the role that you played in the breakdown of the relationship, because it's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. It's never your fault. When you stop victimizing and stop looking at yourself as a victim and look at yourself as part of the problem, that helps you to unpack. But when you are constantly, it's his fault if he would have just did this, or it's her fault if she would have just did this, you're victimizing. Because as long as you are a victim, it makes the other person, the person that was at fault part of it. And then, just learning how to grow from the mistakes. Stop being so hard on yourself and just realizing that these are growing pains. These are things that you got to go through. You got to go through what you got to go through to get to where you need to get to. And learn about yourself. Stop being a passenger in your own, in your own journey to self-discovery. Start to take notes about yourself. Be more aware, self-aware about your weaknesses, your vices, and stop projecting that on other people. Nobody wants to go into a marriage or relationship with somebody, dodging, all of your bullets because you failed to do a self-assessment. You failed to assess your own weaknesses. And now I got to come into a relationship with you and I got to think for me and think for you. It's like you know what I mean? Like, it's like you on a highway, right? You driving. And because people live in your environment, they don't know how to drive. You got to think for you and for them. You got to say, I know this person is getting ready to make this left, even though they shouldn't right here. So I'm going to stop here so he doesn't run into me. So you got to think for you and for the other person. That's how it is when you go into a relationship with somebody that, that hasn't, taken an assessment of themselves. Is not aware of themselves. So you got to think for you and for them to dodge all of their bullets. You're constantly on defense. Absolutely. Absolutely. I got to go now. I just wanted to share that with you guys. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.